I'm going to give you a sneak peek inside the Real Food Grocery Guide so you have a better idea of what you can expect. So after the letter from the author and forward, we have part 1, which is making smart choices. And the first chapter is all about helping you understand why this book is important and why it is so important to choose your food wisely. It goes into the little bit of the backstory about why we're not really educated about what to eat, or limited. Our education is very limited, as well as food marketing and how that really skews our perception of what's healthy, the whole idea of this calorie myth, and it defines what is real food. Then the second chapter is all about the food and health connection, and it helps you realize that we really are what we eat, and it talks about all of the scientific research and the links that we do have between food and heart health and cancer, brain health, memory, learning ability, digestive health, all of these chronic issues and diseases, and what's the link between these issues and our diet. So it really makes a very strong case for choosing our food wisely. And then the third chapter is all about making real food real affordable. And it puts things into perspective. I always like to say we can pay the farmer now or the doctor later. That's a famous quote. But this will give you real hard resources that are going to save you a ton of money on healthy groceries. So besides for just a list of some of my favorite grocers across the country and even internationally, I also have more specific tips about places that you can buy, online resources, and just all around general tips for saving money on healthy food. Next, part 2 is plant-based real foods. This is my favorite section. And each of the chapters is going to be similar to this going forward. So each chapter is going to cover a specific aisle of the grocery store. Like here we have produce, and then it's going to talk about the buzzwords. So for example, organic, local, genetically modified. What do these words mean, and which ones do you want to look for, or which ones do you want to look out for? And then it'll talk about the benefits of produce. So for example, they're anti-inflammatory, they provide satiety, vitamins and minerals. And of course, it's also going to talk about the flip side of the coin. So what are the concerns about produce? So for example, pesticides, what do you have to know? Organic versus conventional. And it really, breaks everything down so you can make the best choices for you and your family. Each section will also give serving size, servings per day, suggestions. And then it gets into the really fun part, which is the benefits of each of these foods, and then how do you select, store, and prepare it. So I really wanted this to be very practical and usable because where do people need the most help? At the grocery store when they're selecting things. And so there are over 50 different produce items in here, really the most common stuff that you're going to find. So how do you choose a melon that's sweet? How do you choose an avocado that's going to stay green? And then how do you store these things? For example, how do you store herbs so they don't go bad in a day? So again, to kind of stretch your dollar and make sure that healthy eating and eating fresh produce is enjoyable and not a struggle. Okay, next chapter is grains. Again, we'll do the buzzwords, the benefits of grains, as well as the concerns with them. So for an example with grains, why is it really important to sprout? What is sprouting? Or why is it important to have fermented grains? And where do you find those? Talks about, gluten and grains and the paleo diet and how they can fit into your life or not. And then it will also talk about the benefits and I'll give you a little bit of background on each of the different types of grains. Next chapter is legumes, beans, and soy. Again, buzzwords, benefits, concerns, how do you cook dried beans, the benefits of all the different types of beans. Beans are actually great, really, really high in antioxidants, which sometimes people don't realize. Talks about soy. Next, nuts and seeds. So similar, you're going to get similar information. So I'm just going to skip through to the animal-based whole foods. This chapter is extremely important if you eat animal products. Again, it'll break down the buzzwords. The buzzwords for animal products are not the same across the board. So words that you want to look for example, on beef, you may not need to see on chicken. So there's a lot of confusion, I feel like, in amongst choosing animal products. So this section will be really eye-opening and really helpful. How do you select and store it? Seafood, same thing. Seafood can be a really healthy part of the diet, so it talks about the benefits, but then it'll also talk about the concerns about seafood. What are the things that you want to be aware of? So for example, mercury and PCBs, and how do you, what are some tips for selecting the best choices and, avoiding those things. Eggs. Eggs are probably one of the most confusing items to buy because there are about a million different buzzwords on the front of a package, like cage-free, free-range, pasture-raised, omega-3 enriched. So what do these things all really mean, and which ones do you want to choose or avoid? Dairy, if you include dairy in here, it will give you some tips, and then it will also give you great tips if you're ready to ditch dairy on some great dairy alternatives. And then packaged foods. So of course, real foods are the best foods, but it's 2017. We're gonna most people are going to eat packaged foods at some point in time. So what do all the buzzwords on the front of food packages mean? You know, natural, organic, raw, gluten-free. Do these things automatically mean healthy or not? And then how do you read a food label? So a food label. So spoiler alert here, most people look directly for the calories or grams of fat. That is not actually the best place to look. You want to look at the ingredient list first. And again, the book explains, you know, why calories are not created equal and why the ingredient list is really the most important part of a food package label. And then how do you determine which ingredients are good or not so good? Talks about some controversial ingredients, GMOs, canned foods, and then so that's all the general, and then we'll go more specifically into suggestions by type of food. And so there's no brands in here because I want you to be able to go into any store anywhere in the world and be able to make the best choices without me telling you directly, and I want you to understand why you're making those choices. So it gives you a really, really good foundation. The oil section is really interesting. What are some of the best oils, and which are the oils you want to avoid, or how do you want to use different oils for different ways of cooking. Goes into frozen foods. So not everything in the frozen aisle is terrible. There are some great choices like frozen fruits and vegetables, why those could be a great economical choice. Then it goes into snacks and sweets, both savory and sweet. So what are the best choices there? Beverages, meat and dairy alternatives, and pretty much everything in between. And then a little bit of a wrap up, and then all of their references. There's a lot of research that went into this, a lot of studies. So in short, the Real Food Grocery Guide is the most practical, user-friendly guide to healthy eating that will help you select the healthiest foods in every aisle of the grocery store without going broke.